So everyone, thank you for to the regulars. Thanks for being back. I missed you last week, and for the new faces, glad to see you here. This is the biweekly AEM frequency. We have another session that is happening every Tuesday, and today we have a special guest, Markus Haack, who's working on project Crosswalk, and Markus has been Markus Markus has been in a number of VIP projects to the point where he's taken as the secret weapon for a lot of tricky projects, and I'm really glad to have him here today. And last time Markus was here was before the Christmas break, and we basically promised a deep dive demo of Crosswalk as kind of a cliffhanger. So I'm really glad to see that the cliffhanger strategy worked out. I think that means we're going to have way more cliffhangers in the future. And with that, I will hand it over to Markus and go ahead. And as always, let's keep this conversational. So if you have questions at any time, please interrupt. If you want to turn on your camera, that's fantastic. So we know where the questions are coming from. Markus, please take it away.
Thanks, Lars. Thanks for the intro, and I start sharing my screen now. So I hope you can see it. Can you see my browser?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Okay, so let me move this one to the other screen. So, demo and introduction on Crosswalk. So, what actually is Crosswalk? And I think if you watch the recording, you maybe have seen a little bit a sneak peek of Crosswalk. And if we speak about Crosswalk, what actually do we mean? That's the internal project name. If we speak about using the AEM, classic AEM offer tooling for edge delivery service. So we're connecting AEM cloud service offering with edge delivery. And actually, I will start with the introduction, a little bit about giving an overview about the architecture, and then I will do a quick demo. And the architecture, and I hope this is readable.
Yes.
We can sort of focus on one of the two sides. It's a left and the right side here of an AEM cloud deployment, because it's a typical AEM cloud service deployment. There you have prod, stage. Of course, you have also development environments. They're not shown here. This only shows prod and stage. Well, I will quickly touch a little bit on the fact why we have production and stage split it that way. But maybe let's start from top to bottom, how actually everything is glued together. So at first, a Crosswalk project is a normal edge delivery service project. The GitHub repo, which we'll say later, looks like any other edge delivery service project. You find blocks, you find here script JavaScript, you find your AEM JavaScript library. Nothing special about the web development at all. There are a few extra files, which I explain as well later. But from the delivery perspective, it's edge delivery, and that's it. We connect if it's an AEM Cloud Service customer, and actually Crosswalk at the moment, that's important, it's only available for AEM Cloud Service customers, not AMS, not on-prem. You have to be, if you want to try it out, you have to be on AEM Cloud Service. We are using the AEM Cloud Service CDN. You already have that as part of a cloud service deployment. And the traffic gets routed to edge delivery. So basically, if a request comes in from a end user, it goes to CDN. From the CDN, it goes to your edge delivery service project. So this is basically hlx.live domain, which is behind this box here. And as normal, code is coming from GitHub repo, content is coming from content files, and images coming from Metabus. And that's it for the end user request. What's more interesting, and I think that's also what I will focus on demo later, is actually the publishing workflow, because that's the part which is different. The content, as I said, comes from aem-author, so no connection to SharePoint, no connection to Google Drive. So let me scroll a little bit down and show you only the part here. At the bottom, we have our aem-author. You log in like normal. And what we have is we have our content structure, and we are using to edit the Edge Level Service pages or the Crosswalk pages. We are using the Universal Editor. That's the new editor AEM team is building. It's not the classic page editor you are maybe familiar. You will see it in a few seconds. It's a new editor. The reason for that is the new editor is capable of rendering, or not really rendering, showing and editing any website you give to the editor, other than the AEM classic page editor, which expects extra div structures, etc. Universal Editor doesn't need that, and it can work with any page you get. So what actually happens if you open a page in the editor renders the page in the iframe, you can edit the page, you will see that in a second. And once you click publish, either in the editor window or in the site admin, that doesn't matter. It's a normal publish event sent. It's the same publish event, it's nothing special, nothing added, which goes to the AEM publish. And technically, under the hood, it's actually also published to the AEM Cloud Service Publish server, which is not needed for this deployment, but it goes there anyway, so no change here. And this publish event is also captured by an event handler, which is part now deployed on Adobe infrastructure. We call it sort of the subscriber because it subscribes to the pipeline events. The subscriber gets the events, it does some filtering if that event is actually some page you want to publish to Edge Delivery. And if yes, it calls the AEM admin API of Edge Delivery. And that admin API goes to the GitHub project, it reads your fstab YAML file, it knows the mount point, and in the case of a Crosswalk project, the mount point doesn't point to SharePoint, it doesn't point to Google, it points to aem-author. So it calls back to aem-author, aem-author renders the page as semantic markup, and we're using the so-called HTML to MD import back to HTML. And then once it's published, it's internally, as you maybe know, internally we store everything as Markdown. It's a Markdown file like any others. You cannot distinguish this is coming from Word or this is coming from AEM. And that's basically it from the high-level architecture. So why do I have split view here, left and right, of stage and publish? That's pretty simple. The way how we work in most of the project is we start off stage, AEM Cloud Service stage deployment, and have a repo for this. And this repo here is where most of the development happens during the project. And this is connected in the fstab YAML to the stage authoring. And this is used during development. And once you're basically ready to go live or make a release later, if you're already live, the code is sent to the prod repo. And this GitHub repo is connected in the fstab YAML file to the production author. And the other side effect is simply, mostly if you work with customers, Adobe developers, or sometimes even partner developers, they don't get access to the production author. So we need a stage system, or sometimes we use a development system to build up the new site. And we need a system where we get access to the AEM author in deployment, simply to test things, to play with some content and to create some test pages, which you typically don't want to do on an AEM production system.
Okay.
This about the overall architecture.
Markus,
are there any questions?
Looking at that architecture, is there a line between the GitHub code repo and the AEM author environments?
Actually, not the code repo, but the hlx.live deployment. So there is a dotted line from here to the author or from here to the author.
Okay.
And the reason is that if you open the page in the Universal Editor, we want to have a visible preview. And for that, we don't want to duplicate or copy or sync all your JavaScript. and all your CSS, etc.
Right.
So if the page is rendered within the editor, we actually loading the JavaScript files and the CSS files directly from aem-live.
Okay.
I can show it later if you do look at the source code of the page. So there's a dotted line going back here because we need this the JavaScript and the client-side code.
Okay. And does that respect the right? So I would then assume that to a certain degree your AEM stage environment works like the AEM CLI that is acting as a proxy, right? To your.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So okay. Well, I'm going to ask you about the development flow and how to work with branches later on. So but that's good. That was my question about the architecture.
Okay.
Are there
maybe on the development workflow? I can maybe comment on this quickly. So the development workflow is the same like for any other Adobe project. The only difference is if you want to have test content, you go into AOR for change it there and then publish it.
Right.
Yeah. And to work with branches, that's also possible. The universal editor by default, if you open a page in the universal editor, it just goes to the main branch, but it has a query parameter, and then you can give it the name of the branch, and then it can read the JavaScript and CSS from that branch if you want to have a preview what you're currently looking at and what you're currently developing for.
Okay. Okay. Are there more questions about the architecture?
Could you comment on what is stored in the JCR? Like, what does that structure look like in contrast to a traditional AEM component store?
Yeah, so it's a classic CQ page, as you know it. The only difference is it's a new set of components, and actually, I'm not. I can show it. Maybe when you do the demo, I definitely can give you the JSON view. I'm not sure if I can do CRXDE, but it's a CQ page with components like any other page. The most or the biggest visible difference is since we are rendering with the new set of components, we are rendering a semantic HTML structure, which is pretty flat. So compared to a classic AEM page where you have nested containers, responsive grid, the structure of an HTML page is pretty flat. It's basically the only container we have is a section component to represent a section on HTML, and this section gets all the other components. But there's no deep nesting of the structure compared to classic AEM. But CQ page, Sling components, and that's it. So there's nothing changed. And that's if you will see the demo of the other questions. Otherwise, I will switch to demo. Then it's maybe more visual.
Let's do that.
Okay. So for the demo, I'm using Adobe Experience Leak, and I guess most of you know what Experience Leak is, which is currently rebuilt and remodeled and gets a relaunch soon, I think shortly before Adobe Summit, so in a few weeks. This is already the version which is on HTML, so it's Experience Leak site for the languages. I mean, I'm working here with a copy of the homepage, simple for the fact they had on Tuesday a sprint demo, and I didn't want to mess around with the homepage or any other page, so I'm working with this one. And I have a test page and prepared this for demo, and I can simply open it, and it will open the universal editor of this rendering this page. I have it open now. Yep. Okay, and what you can see here in the editor iframe is actually an edge delivery page, which is close to it, what is the final version. I show you the HTML in a second. I say close to the final version because what it actually is on top of it, it's extra. The HTML has a few extra attributes, which is basically instrumentation for the editor, so that the editor know that this is a hero block or marquee block, which you can edit. That the editor know here we're starting a new section. In this section we have a block called feature cards, and so on. And as you already can see, if I select the block, you get all the properties. So this is part of the new editor. I don't want to go too deep into the editor in general, but short, there's no dialogues anymore. This is part of the editor. Basically, everything what you know from before, what was sort of CQ dialog, is now shown here at this side rail. And if we open this block here, this marquee block, we can then have all the properties we have typically in dialog. We have now at the side, so we can change. We can maybe change the assets and use another asset which we maybe find here. Let's maybe use this bubble here, and then we change the asset. This is a subtitle. Welcome to the demo. Let's quickly change this as well. And this is basically now updated. And this is how you interact with an ancillary page or Crosswalk page in the editor.
Markus, I have two questions. Number one, what would be an appropriate alt text for the image that you just picked? Is that a red blob?
It's actually,
it doesn't look like a woman at laptop, which you have at the moment.
yeah, that's well, let's maybe change it. That's a good point. Red bubble,
blob,
maybe.
yeah, red bubble.
Okay,
great.
yes. So
yeah.
Yep.
So my second question is about the long description. I see that I can do a bit of text formatting here. In particular, I can mark the text as left aligned, centered, or right aligned, or justified. Does this translate over to Edge Delivery Services?
That's actually a good question, honestly. I didn't build these blocks. I didn't try out for this specific block.
Okay.
So we need to try out, but maybe we do it left aligned. I'm not even sure. I think that there's too much options visible here for the editors. It doesn't even, you see here, it doesn't isn't reflected.
Right.
Because here it's shown what it actually is developed and styled for this marquee block. I think they need to disable a few of the options here. The rich text options are too many.
Okay.
Actually, it's a good catch. I can report an issue for the team later. What I also want to show is, are you other questions, Lars?
Well,
this.
I'm hearing a faint ring of, can the QA person please shut up? Yeah, let's continue with your demo. Obviously, I'm going to have more questions, but yeah.
Okay, as a side here, I can also switch to the content tree. I think that's also you notice from the classic aem editor. And here you can actually see a little bit of the structure, and this is sort of represented the JCR structure. So we have a root, we have a section container, we have a marquee. The data section has this feature card. There's a section below the carousel, and another section. If you watch closely, if I click the section, the editor is also moving me there. Here I have a media block, another media block, and so on. And this works for the blocks in general, but this also works inside the block. So if I go, for example, here to the carousel and then expand the items of the carousel, which is in this case 4 items, I can switch to the items and it jumps within the carousel to the content pieces, and then I can change the content piece, let's say.
Right. So
Markus was here, and so on.
Okay.
So you can navigate the page structure using the editor as well.
Right. Okay. Two more questions, Markus. One is in Edge Delivery Services, right? We have as you mentioned, right? We have a relatively flat structure. We have sections. Sections contain a lot of regular content, and they contain a couple of blocks. And famously, blocks cannot contain other blocks, right? And what I'm seeing here is we have sections that are components, which contain components, which are blocks, and they contain other components. In this case, the teaser. What how is the teaser being rendered? Does that translate to a nested block, which sounds impossible, or is that some other trick?
Actually, the block here, the block itself, and I'm not sure if you can see this by these icons, they have tiny little different icons. The block is the carousel block.
Right.
And if you map this to a Word document, every teaser in AEM, classic AEM terms, the teaser is sort of a subcomponent or a sling resource. Yes, but the carousel block takes care to render this as individual rows. So this would render one block, which is called carousel, and it has, in this case, 4 rows in the Word table. It would have 4 rows, and these would be represented by a teaser. So it's constructed out of multiple AEM components, so there's not always a one-to-one mapping. So in this case, the carousel is just rendering the outer div, if you will, of the block, and each teaser resource is then responsible for rendering one row of the table.
Right. Okay, got it.
So it's not messing around with edge delivery HTML. It's really rendering the same structure as you would expect from the live side.
Okay, and you have here a main component at the root, and then you have section components. And what I would normally expect in a regular existing AEM project is I would expect a paragraph system, right? So my assumption is we're dealing here with components that have been custom built for Crosswalk and for the edge delivery services integration.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So the way we envision how Crosswalk works for your customer's project is our goal is there's no customization needed on the AEM side. And if you cannot customize anything on the AEM side, you need still need a set of components, and these are shipped by AEM. So if you currently they are behind a feature flag. After Crosswalk is later this year, maybe after Crosswalk gets GA, we will make them visible. But they are already deployed in the cloud service behind the feature flag. And if you enable it, you get a new set. I think it's 8 or 9 default. We call them Crosswalk or edge delivery components as classic AEM Sling components, and they are responsible for rendering disadvantage HTML. And there's one component which is pretty generic, which we call simply a block component. And technically, when I show you later a little bit of the code, the carousel is represented in AEM in the backend as a block, so-called block component.
Okay.
The same like the feature card or the marquee would be a block component. The section is a component, and I'm not sure if we have here a title or an image would be individual components, but it's a set of components you get as a customer, and then you use them on the AEM side. You use them as is. The only thing you need to provide is the definition that what your marquee actually makes your marquee. So it's technically rendered by the block component, but what properties the marquee has, or what properties the carousel, the media, and so on, what properties they have, this is the only configuration which gets deployed or it's read by AEM. And this configuration tells the editor which properties actually have. So if I go, let's say, to the media, and if I switch to the properties rail here, I see a certain set of fields which are used by this block, and these definition, which fields are here, what are the order they should be displayed for the editor. This is the only special configuration you need to provide for a cross project.
Okay, cool. Good.
Okay, so did a few changes. Now let's publish the page. This is actually the preview. You get an in-editor preview as well. And what I will do is to show you maybe before publish. Let me copy this here. This URL. I show you the HTML, how the HTML looks like. If you open the page directly without the editor. Maybe I do disable it, because actually this is what we add as well when we publish it. And if we now do view source, it's not that nicely formatted, unfortunately, but you can maybe sort of see how the markup is. So we have our body, we have an empty header, like on the other Crosswalk projects. We have our main. Then in the main, we have a first div, which I explain the data attributes here, which is a section div. And then from here to, I'm not sure where this thing ends, I think to here, we have our first block. And this is a little bit, let me make this maybe a little better, because this is the only difference in the HTML, or maybe two, the formatting. And the other difference is that we have these extra data attributes here. And these attributes are read by the editor, and they actually tell the editor sort of two things. First, what is this thing? What is this element? And second, what is the resource, or let's say the place? If I change this thing, where is it actually stored to? And this is sort of coming via this attribute. Let's maybe take this one first. So this is sort of telling the editor, if you change something in this directly as a property, maybe let's take the block here. That's easier. So if you change something for the block, then this block goes back to this page, JCR content, root, section node, block node. And this is basically where it's stored. So this is how the editor knows if you update something on the properties of this element, where it's stored to in JCR.
Okay.
And the other information about this is telling the editor this is a component. This is the component model, which is actually the name of the block as well. This is the human readable. This is just a nice label for the editor. And if the block has block options, like in this case, it has a few block options that's added here as classes, and later it's added as in brackets, typically when you render this and publish it. And this is how the connection works and how the editor knows, okay, this element is editable, this is something I can select and edit. And not everything needs to be editable, but everything what you put on a page which has these data attributes is recognized by the editor as editable content.
Right. And Markus, I would assume that you could show me this page also on hlx.live or hlx.page, so that we can.
I have it actually already open. Perfect. This is the one before I publish it. So this is the one you have seen when I opened the intro, but now let's actually make it smaller, publish it quickly. That says publish, and then let's maybe go over here. And now the demo effect, hopefully. Okay, it's not published yet. Now it's published. Okay, perfect. Okay. So you see the image change, which is here. And if we go here, we could even go do the markdown, which is not available, maybe more readable. And then you can see the blocks. For example, here the carousel with 3 items, 1, 2, 3. This is how the carousel is rendered. Right. And how the blocks are built.
Why do you have empty columns in the carousel and in the featured cards? I see a couple of empty rows here.
The reason this was built by the team is that first, the way how this works is the blocks, the aem side of the block always renders the entire block with all the potential content. And the team here, for example, the featured cards, which has empty rows here, that means there are 2 properties somewhere which have not been filled out. So let's quickly check this in the editor again. If I open preview, the featured cards, you see here there's keywords which is empty, and I think here auto sort by, this is the default, nothing was selected, so that's why the last 2 they are empty. Okay. You could theoretically skip them. At the moment they are rendered, all of them are rendered. Okay. It's not. We are often working with a team to optimize this a little bit and to have it a little bit nicer. There are other things which you maybe want to combine, because here, for example, the content is not really rich text, could be all combined into one rich text field, but this was decided by the project team to structure that way. Yeah. But this is how the page looks eventually And from here, it's like any other page as well. And
Right.
actually, what I forgot to show, let me quickly go back to the author. This is on the author, and you see it's rendered pretty nicely, same like here. And you can see, if I do view source again, what I explained at the beginning, we are loading, not this one, we are loading styles, we are loading script shares and aem library, or this project was created earlier when the name was still Liv Franklin. They are not loaded directly simply for course reason, because if it's in the editor iframe, it's a little bit tricky with course. We're working on that. That's why they're loaded via some aem servlet, which is it's a simple reverse proxy. It's all what it does. It goes to the hlx.live and passes through whatever it gets from there. With proper course handlers, maybe this can be changed that you load it directly, but for the editor iframe, it's not so critical. If you load it, there's no big difference.
Right. Okay. So.
Yeah. And I keep this open. And the last thing for this, or any questions on the demo, otherwise I will switch to the Git repo and show a little bit of.
I'll get to this now, but scratch. Would you develop the block first and then add the universal editor to it, or is it hand in hand? Or I'm just confused, but so let's say you mentioned before that the team decided to use lines instead of paragraphs, or rows instead of paragraphs. So at what decision made? Was it in the block, or was it in the editor, or the connection of the editor to the block?
Okay, this is maybe the audio was a little bit breaking for me, but I hope I got the question. So the question is, how do you develop this? Is it the editor first? Is it block first, or does it sort of goes hand to hand? Is that correct? Okay, so it goes sort of in parallel. For the editor, we have here a few extra JSON files, and I explain what these JSON files are in a second. And you sort of build them sort of in parallel with the block. And in the branch, you can also point the editor to show, once you have pushed the branch to GitHub, you can also point the editor and use the block code from that branch, so you can do a preview before. And you will do this sort of hand in hand, because for the editor, you don't need much for the editor. You need technically, even the first two files are the most important ones. There's a component definition and there's a component models. And what are these doing? And you need to work with both of them basically same time while you're defining the blocks. At least typically, I think you do this a little bit earlier. You define your content model, same like you would do in Word. You first create the table in Word, and then sort of define how the structure of the block should look like if it's a block. And this is what happens in the content model. You maybe do this a little bit earlier, but then at the same time you sort of develop the block JavaScript and CSS as well. And these two files actually, they control the editor behavior in the sense of two aspects. Let's say with the model JSON, what happens in the model JSON, you have actually seen this already under the hood before. The model JSON controls, make it smaller, what properties are available in the site rail for this block. So if I select this feature card or the marquee, what elements are visible here is defined by the model JSON. I'll show you that in a second. And the second JSON defines what components are available. So if I go to a section and actually also see about the nested, only if I'm in a section, I actually can add child elements. So the marquee, this is already blocked. There's no extra element can be added here. But if I select the section, you see there's a little plus icon, and when I click it, I get all the available blocks, and this is coming from the second JSON file, which defines which blocks / components are actually available.
Okay, and you can then fine tune what section is capable of holding block.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, and this actually, and then maybe for this, I'll show you the repository. This is maybe just a little bigger. This is the repo of the project, and as I said before, it looks like any other Edge service project. Coming to the big difference is the FS tab. Maybe let's start from this one. The FS tab, as you can see, in this case, it's pointing to an IO runtime function. It's not pointing directly to the AEM offer. This is by cost because they are doing some extra processing and they actually have two. What I didn't tell you, the Experience League project has two content sources. They have content coming from GitHub and they have content coming from AEM offer. That's why they go with runtime, and the runtime option knows which path goes to which content source. But under the hood, it's props into the offer. The second file, which is important, part of the Crosswalk project, is called path.yaml, or actually path.json. Ignore the YAML that goes away, it's actually a JSON file. And this has two areas. It has a so-called mapping and it has includes. And includes is pretty simple. Let's take this first. Includes tells AEM what paths publish to edge delivery. In this config, everything which is content exlm/something is considered as edge delivery code. So if you maybe do a migration project, and we have this for other customers, they keep stuff on classic AEM publish and they move sites to edge delivery step by step. Then this will be more detailed and more fine-grained, and you can decide, okay, this content is published to edge delivery, and if it's not it's not matching this includes filter, it's not published to edge delivery. In this case, it's everything. And then there's a mapping, because this is needed. Remember, we are connecting back to the AEM offer, and the AEM offer typically doesn't know every time about the public URL. So in this mapping, we map, this is the internal path which is known by AEM offer, and this is the public visible path. As simple as that. So everything, this is for the homepage, and this is basically everything which is, sorry, this is for any kind of content which is mapping this path. Basically, you can, there's no star, but it's a star mapping, maps to a public path. So everything which is followed by global, coming after global is slash something on the public URL. The difference is the homepage that's mapped to the root, and then they have a special mapping. They put, this is where they put the mail data, redirects, etc. Actually, I forgot to show you the tables. We have a table editor in Crosswalk as well, so you can edit the typical stuff you have, like mail data, placeholders, these kind of things which you have in an Excel sheet. They can be edited with a sort of table stylish editor in Crosswalk as well. I forgot to show this. So this is where the publisher mechanism knows what's the internal path and what's the public path. Because if I go back to my diagram here, once you publish, the AEM admin API only knows about the public path. It doesn't know and doesn't care where this is stored in JCI. There's no clue about this. That's why when we're calling back to AEM with the public API, we need the mapping actually where this public API content, where this public path maps to into the internal path. This is about this file, and then coming to the other two files, the ones I mentioned. Let's say we start with the component definition. And that is defining, as I said, what's available if you click the plus sign, and we have two groups here. We have a group default content, which has the text, title, an image, and the button sort of. And these are, as you can see, this is Sling resource type, and this is components which Adobe is providing you, and you don't need to create them. The ID is mapping to the identifier. In case of a block, it's also mapping to the block. The default content, pretty simple, and if we go to the other areas, actually there are containers, and containers can be a section. That's the only container you have. And then we have the blocks. And the blocks here, I open this maybe again. You see here the blocks. There's an icon block, here's the marquee. And if we check for the marquee, here we go. This is how we define the marquee for the editor. This is only read by the editor, and it's using under the hood this link resource type. And then we have template defines two things. It defines things which are editable, which are visible in the editor. If there's a default image or the title is pre-filled with a default title, the description gets a pre-filled content, etc. And it has a mapping to the model. And the model actually tells then later the block component how the table will look like. This is basically for all the blocks you have in a project. This is the only code. It's not really code. It's called only configuration, which gets read by aem author, which is special to Crosswalk. So you once you define them, it's either default content with the simple components, or all the blocks, they all use this block component. And that's all you need to define. No Java code, no HTML components, nothing like that is deployed as part of the project. Let me show you also the model, and then actually I'm always done with the demo part. If you go to the models, and let's go to the marquee as well. Here we go. That is the definition for the marquee. The idea again maps to the block, which we have in JavaScript. And then these fields are basically one entry in fields is rendered as one row of the table. At the same time, they tell the editor what is visible in the site where. So the first entry is the image. And if we select the marquee again, so we can see it. Okay, put it on, but the first one is the image. Then there's the alt text, background color, and so on. And if you check this here, this is the same follow. So it tells the editor, okay, this is a reference component. It's stored as file reference. It's going to be an image. It's only single select. You can't select multiple. It's a description. Next one, it's a text input type string. This is the JCR property, which is later stored in label, no default value, description, option, and so on. Then we have the background colors. They modeled this as a selection. So it tells it's a selection. It's stored as a JCR property called classes, and so on. And these are the options. And this is how you define what is visible in the editor.
Okay.
And this basically glues everything together.
Markus, can you
yes?
Can you quickly in one sentence explain the difference between a component definition and a component model?
The model is controlling what's visible here at the site. So every block which you want to edit, if you want to edit the attributes or the rows of the block table, they need to be defined in the model.
Okay.
And the component definition is what you define here as available blocks / components or elements.
Okay, got it.
You could maybe even compare the model with the CQ dialog definition.
Yes, the model is sort of the replacement of the CQ dialog in old times. Yes.
Perfect.
And
thank you.
I think in the old times, in the page set and the CQ template, you defined which are the allowed components thing. That's what you have in the component definition file.
Got it. Okay. Good. So I don't know if we have time for this, but could you quickly show what it takes to, so if what the development process looks like, right? So assuming we would want to create a new block, let's say an embed block, right, which is my usual example. How would we do that?
I cannot show it because I have not checked out the project.
Okay.
I'm not actively working on the project, but I can quickly explain. So let's say we want to create a new block. We create a branch. In the branch, we create the block, the code JavaScript CSS for the block, like any other project. So this is nothing special.
Yep.
And the only extra thing is if this, let's say it's an embed block and it takes a link to YouTube or Instagram or whatever, or Twitter, then this block needs, let's say, an input field for an URL. And this is exactly going into the two files I showed you. So I would first create an entry in the component definition. Add it to the, I think it should go to the blocks category, give it a human readable name. The ID maps to the block, and then you define, this has sub-elements. Let's maybe take a simpler one. Let's say the columns, for example. The columns, they don't have much stuff in it. Okay, let's take this out, correct cast. This has at least a separate. So you create this plugin definition where you tell, okay, if the user adds this component, I'm speaking, if I use the term component, I'm speaking about the aem side of things.
Right.
If I use the term block, I'm speaking about edge delivery side of things.
Right.
Both is aem, but let's say classic aem.
Yeah.
So this tells if you add this, our new embed to the page, this tells the editor, okay, what actually is the JCR substructure the editor needs to create if it's saved. And this is a string resource type, and the template is basically if you want to pre-fill the field. Here we would define a URL. Here we would define just the model, the connection to the model. And then you already can add the page to the page. You cannot edit it at the moment because the editor doesn't know what its fields should be displayed in the site well and what elements should actually be able to edit. And this is what happens then in the second file in the models. And let's take the marquee again as an example. Here you would define the fields, and our embed block would maybe get only one field, which was a text input, a text string, which is the URL, a little bit of the script like this one, sort of this one, copy of this one, description, maybe if needed, label, a default value maybe you don't need, and then here you define, maybe call it URL or something, which is then the JCR property this string is stored to. And with that, the editor is already happy. The editor will show you the fields in the site rail, and you can enter it and you can basically store it. And then you only need to create a JavaScript and CSS with whatever you want to do with the block.
Markus, why don't we store the component model and the component definition right next to the block? In terms, right? So I see that when you're developing a block, you basically have to go into two places, right? One part is you do everything in the block folder where you have your CSS and your JavaScript, and then you have the JSONs, which are two big central files.
This would technically work. The reason for this is, I think it's pretty simply driven by the universal editor. These two files, the component models and the component definitions, they are independent from edge delivery. So this is because the universal editor can be used for other types of application. You can use it to build your Vue or React Spa, whatever, which doesn't have blocks or similar concepts. Maybe they have also React components or Vue components, whatever.
Right.
And connect this to aem and get the data from aem, classic aem content fragments, for example.
Okay.
The place and then the name and also the schema of these two JSON files is defined by the universal editor.
Okay, so you could probably build something that is basically going through all of your blocks and then simply aggregating model definition. I want to call it fragments, but that term is already overloaded. Pieces and stitch them together. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that would work. You could create a quick script and put them next to the block, and then create a quick script, for example, which aggregates them. That should work. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Markus, thank you for this walkthrough. Really appreciate it. Quick question: is it possible to show off the components that are available via Franklin in AEM? The block component, there were a few others that you showed.
Yep, I can show them to you via our GitHub repo. Because, or actually, maybe let me quickly try if I have access to, where's this one? If CXDE works, no, it doesn't. It's not deployed.
Maybe while
Okay,
you're doing that, are those components available via like package include, or like how are those components made available to customers?
They are deployed as part of EM Cloud Service by default. As I said, they are currently behind a feature flag. Once it's declared GA, you get them and they are visible, or they would be visible in AM. We are also providing a quick how's it called? A template for quick site template. A quick site template to quickly bootstrap a basic page, which is using these components. But the components are basically not examples, sorry. Content, GCR libs, okay, components. These are basically components. So you get a block component. This is used for each and every block you define. And all of the rest except the spreadsheet, which is special, are basically just used to build default content. Only little bit different block is, or the only block which is behaving a little bit different is the columns block, because the columns block is also sort of a container. It cannot get other blocks, but it can get default content. That's why the columns block is a little bit special. But then you have an image, you have a section, text, title, just these are all representing default content, and you have the section, and then we have the standard stuff you need in the EM. We have a page component, and we have a component for the secure page root of your component. These are used to structure basically all of them except the spreadsheet are used to render or can be used to render the page and get the semantic markup. For example, if we take, let's say, a text, pretty simple, you can guess what it does. It renders a p tag, and then it puts the text into the p tag. And that's basically it. The image does the same. The only more complex is really the block, because it needs to render rows and different colors and these kind of things. The spreadsheet is not really used for the page itself. That's actually the thing I forgot about. I can maybe quickly show you. If we go back to the Experience League site again, if we go back here, let's take the metadata. We have a spreadsheet, sort of a spreadsheet-like editor as well. It's a basic editor where you can edit these more table structures. And if you click edit here, then you get the metadata. What you have in the metadata sheet in SharePoint or in Google. You have these elements. You can reorder them, you can delete them, you can add new at the end, and so on.
Okay.
And that's the only component which you're not using directly on the page. That's the only one which is special.
Okay.
And you get these deployed as your cloud service instance, and they are in libs, and we also block the overlays, so you cannot even overlay them in /apps, because that's not how they are intended. So this is, from the way how to use them, it's definitely different than classic WCM core components, because it's really intended that you can use them out of the box with no JavaScript, no HTML code, etc. deployment, and you can focus on JavaScript and CSS.
Okay, so I'm super sorry to interrupt, because this looks like it's the first time that we are going to run over timing wise, and this means this is good news for everyone here, because you can still stay on the call and continue ask Markus questions. It's kind of bad news for me, because I have a customer call starting in about 45 seconds. So I will stop the recording and drop out. And it's obviously terrible news for everyone who is just watching this as a recording, because the recording is going to stop in 10 seconds. And I recommend everyone to dial in live next week and do this. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.